In colonial India, a farmer's land, well, it was everything, his entire world. But what happens when a new system turns that greatest asset into his biggest weakness? That's what we're digging into today, the story of the peasant's debt trap.
Yeah, this question, it really gets to the heart of our story, doesn't it? The answer shows this massive shift in how society worked under colonial rule. And trust me, it had devastating consequences. So let's unpack how it all went down.
Okay, I want you to put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine you're a farmer. The harvest has totally failed, or worse, the tax collector's knocking on your door demanding this new, incredibly high land revenue. You've got no savings, you're desperate. What on earth do you do?
Well, you turn to the only person around who has cash, the local moneylender. He says, sure, I'll give you a loan. But of course, there's a catch. He wants collateral. And the only thing of real value you have is the land, the same land your family has worked for generations. You agree, crossing your fingers that the next harvest will be better and you can pay it all back.
But here's the thing. This is not a fair deal. Not even close. The moneylender uses every trick in the book. We're talking sky-high interest rates. He's keeping false records. And if you can't read or write, well, he might just forge your signature on a document that says you owe way more than you borrowed. Suddenly, that small loan, it's spiraling completely out of control.
Before you know it, the debt is it's impossible. There's no way to repay it. And now, the moneylender is backed by a whole new legal system. So he just takes your land, just like that. In a single generation, your family goes from being landowners to landless laborers. This personal tragedy, this exact story, was happening all over India. But why? What was it that changed to make this possible?
And this right here shows you just how big that change was. You see, before the British came along, a moneylender just couldn't seize a farmer's land. It wasn't really a thing. Land was seen as a community resource, and the village itself had the final say. But under the British, everything flipped. Land became just another asset, a commodity, something that could be bought, sold, and most importantly, seized to cover a debt.
This whole process actually has a name. It's called the commodification of land. And this concept is absolutely key to understanding what happened. Think of it as the engine that powered this whole debt trap. By turning land into a private asset that could be transferred, the British system handed moneylenders a level of power they had never, ever had before.
So you might be wondering, how did this actually happen on the ground? Well, it wasn't by accident. It happened through specific policies. The British rolled out 3 major land revenue systems that totally reshaped the countryside. And you guessed it, put the moneylender in a position of incredible power.
And wow, take a look at the scale of these changes. The riot-worry system alone covered more than half, 51%, of all the territory under British rule. When you add up all 3 of these systems, you realize that pretty much every single farmer in colonial India was caught up in one of these new frameworks. Right, and like I said, these systems didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were designed by specific British administrators. You've got Lord Cornwallis, who got the ball rolling with the permanent settlement. Then came Thomas Munro with the Riatwari system and Holt Mackenzie with the Mahalwari. These guys were literally the architects of this new reality, the ones who wrote the new rules of the game. Okay, let's break this down a bit because the details might look different, but the end result was pretty much the same for the farmer. Under the permanent settlement, you had a landlord, a zamindar, collecting the revenue. In the Riatwari system, the peasant, or riot, paid the state directly. And in the Mahalwari system, the whole village paid together. But here's the kicker, the really crucial point. It didn't matter who collected the tax. The demand was always high, it was rigid, and it had to be paid in cash. And that is what consistently pushed farmers right into the arms of the moneylender.
So you've got this relentless pressure, this whole new system of land and money. Something like that can only go on for so long before it just breaks. The countryside was basically becoming a powder keg of anger and resentment, just waiting for a spark.
And then, 2 things happened that really lit the fuse. First, the land revenue was often way overassessed. I mean, they were demanding more money than the land could even produce. And second, when things got really bad, like a famine or a drought, there was no relief. None. The state still demanded its money. This just forced millions more people to go to the moneylender, speeding up this terrible cycle of debt and losing their land.
And, well, eventually, that anger just exploded. And it's really telling to see who the peasants went after. During the huge revolt of 1857, one of the first things they did in many places was attack the moneylenders and burn their account books, the physical symbols of their debt. And that was followed by another massive revolt in the Deccan region in 1875, which was specifically targeting moneylenders.
This quote just says it all, doesn't it? For the peasant, the moneylender was the human face of their suffering. He was the guy who forged the documents, who charged that crushing interest, and who physically took their land away. He was the enemy they could see.
So let's pull all these threads together. What's the lasting impact of this whole system? What are the big things we should really take away from this complete transformation of rural India?
Okay, let's do a quick recap of the key points. First, British policy turned land into something you could just buy and sell, a commodity. Second, this handed incredible power to the moneylenders, making them a really important part of the whole colonial system of exploitation. Third, all this trapped peasants in this awful, vicious cycle of debt that led to them losing their land. And finally, when the peasants had had enough and fought back, they aimed their anger right at the moneylender, the person who was the visible face of their oppression.
And that brings us to a final big question. The peasants attacked the moneylender, sure, because he was the enemy they could see, the direct cause of their suffering. But was he the real enemy? Or was he just a symptom of a much bigger, much more powerful system? A system that created him and gave him all that power in the first place? Now that's something to think about.